Welcome to the Information Commissioner's Office. If you want to use our Welsh language service, please press 9. If not, please hold. We don't audio record calls to this helpline. For information about what we do with personal data, please visit our website at ico.org.uk/privacy-notice. Our helpline is for organisations, people who work for themselves, and for members of the public. Please note, we will treat all people with courtesy and respect, and we expect the same. If anyone behaves in an unreasonable way to our staff, we will bring the call to a close. To help get you through to the right team, please select from the following 3 options. If you know the extension number of the person you want to speak to, please press 1. If you're calling from an organisation, a small club or association, you're a sole trader, or you work for yourself, please press 2. If you're a member of the public, please press 3.
Press 3.
Here are your 3 options. To discuss an inquiry or complaint you've already sent to us, please press 1. To discuss a new inquiry or complaint with us, please press 2. If you're a whistleblower and are considering making a protected disclosure under the whistleblowing provisions of UK legislation, please press 3.
Press 2.
To listen to these we're now transferring you to a member of our team. Information Commissioner's Office, how can I help?
Yes, good morning. Can I ask who I'm speaking to?
Angy.
Hi, Angie. I'm a member of the public, and I'm making a general inquiry regarding a disclosure of records. I understand that you cover both the Data Protection Act and the Freedom of Information Act. Are those the 2 legislations that you regulate only?
Yeah, and the EIR, which is the Environmental Information Regulations.
Okay, so you regulate three legislations, yes?
Yep.
Okay, well, this is a bit of a grey area, and I just wanted to gain some clarity on this. Now, first of all, I wanted to deal with the subject access request. With regards to subject access request, those are only relevant to living people. So when a person dies, the Data Protection Act no longer comes into force. But then, I'm just struggling to understand how I can gain access to the data held by a local authority, who are, hindering my request for disclosure of my mother's social care records. So the local authority have social care records, and I can't make a subject access request with them because she's no longer alive. Can you advise me does that come under the Freedom of Information request, or does that not come under any legislation?
It wouldn't come under any legislation.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, what's happened is that so how would I be able to gain access to the my mother's deceased social care records?
You can still request it, but it wouldn't be covered under obviously the legislation that we oversee. It would be entirely up to the organisation if they will provide that to you or not.
Okay, all right. Because in this particular circumstance, I mean, thank you very much. That was my understanding as well, that the Freedom of Information request does not come into force. Now, the organization themselves have responded, and they've reclassified it as a Freedom of Information request. And they've applied Section 41 of the Freedom of Information request. Now, can you just tell me a little bit more about Section 41 of the Freedom of Information Act?
You're going to have to bear with me.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine.
Under Freedom of Information.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, that just says it's information provided in confidence. So the information is exempt information if it was obtained by a public authority from any other person, including another public authority, and the disclosure of the information to the public Otherwise, that under this act by the public authority holding it would constitute a breach of confidence,
Okay.
actionable by that or any other
Okay.
person.
Well, I mean, as you can appreciate, I'm a member of the public. Any member of the public can ring yourselves up. It's just taken me 2 minutes to ring yourself up. I've asked a simple question within the 5 minutes, and you have quite clearly informed me that a deceased person's records do not come under the Freedom of Information Act or the Data Protection Act. So why would the local authority, who is obviously a public body, who have dedicated and qualified data protection officers who should be fully vested in the legislation and know the law, look to deal with my request as a Freedom of Information Act, and then utilize that Freedom of Information Act to put forward a Section 41 exemption? I'm just struggling to understand what I mean. It's quite clear to me, and it's quite clear to yourself and anybody else, that this data does not come under the Freedom of Information Act. And let's just say for argument's sake that the information does come under the Freedom of Information Act, they are then asking me to provide them with a power of attorney document, or prove to them my eligibility criteria to gain access to this information. Because
so that would mean that they would need information to verify that you are the individual making the request on the individual that you're saying that you are. Because anybody can make a request for information. That's the only reason why they have said that.
Yeah, I understand this, but like I said, let's assume the fact that this data does come under the Freedom of Information Act. And quite rightly, if it's the Data Protection Act, they need to verify who I am. But are not Freedom of Information requests requester blind?
Yeah, so that's why you would need to go back to them and just explain that.
No, but they should know that, though. That they have taken something. For example, if my mum was still alive, she had done so, and she could make a subject access request under the Data Protection Act. Under that criteria, they need to verify who I am, i.e., as a third party acting on her behalf and having that authority. That's fair enough. But like I said, this is not that circumstance. You clearly stated that once my mother has died, it no longer comes under the Data Protection Act or the Freedom of Information Act. However, the local authority, I've explained that to them, but the local authority have insisted that this now comes under the Freedom of Information Act, where they've then proceeded to provide, put an exemption in place. But then, therefore, they've asked for my, authority, not my identity, but my authority. And what I've done is, just 1 second, so they've asked for my information. And I'm just struggling to understand how they can constitute something that you and I agree is not freedom of information. Having classified it as freedom of information, they are then requesting my authority to gain access to this data. I don't need to give authority, because if it's freedom of information, it's public data. So my understanding.
Yeah,
you go on.
Yeah, so the information you are requesting is not obviously publicly made available. So yeah, they have obviously relied on an exemption under the legislation that isn't overseen by obviously this request. So it just means that they would need more training in regards to that. But you would need to go back to them and just explain that obviously it wouldn't be covered under the freedom of information, because it's still classed as somebody's personal data, even though it's not covered under the Data Protection Act. So they need to find another way to provide you with that information.
But obviously, I have a long history with this local authority. While my mother was alive, she had made a subject access request and given me an authority letter. So she had given me initially an authority letter dated in December, I think, November 2013. So I presented them with that. I said, look, when my mom was alive, she authorized me to get this data. So that's the authority I'm working on. And they said that's out of time. All right. And then, so therefore, I then proceeded to provide them with a lasting power of attorney document, and they've come back and stated that that lasting power of attorney is not valid because it was revoked by the public guardian. But my argument was that even if it was not revoked, it still wouldn't be valid because the lasting power of attorney has only effect while the person's alive. So when a person dies, the lasting power of attorney has no effect. But I just feel that I'm just being hindered here, and so I'm just looking at what options are available to me. Now, quite rightly, at the early start of this conversation, you've just told me that this data does not come under the Freedom of Information Act or the Data Protection Act. So, what exactly does this come under? Do they simply take ownership of this data now?
Yeah, so it is up to them to determine if they can provide you with that information, and obviously they need to determine how long they would need to keep that information for as well once an individual has passed away.
No, but under what legislation do they need to determine how long they need to keep that data?
That's just their retention policy that they need to have a look at.
Yeah, but that's up to them. They can keep the information indefinitely. But basically,
they can't keep it indefinitely. They need to have a retention policy.
Okay, and that retention policy can be indefinite.
It can't be indefinite, no.
Why?
So you can ask them for a copy of their retention policy. All organisations have different lengths on how long they would keep certain information for. You need to ask them for that retention policy. They should be able to provide you with that.
Okay, but is not the data retention policy part of the Data Protection Act?
Yes, but it still says how long they have to keep information for, even if when the individual has passed away, they still need to have a retention policy.
Okay, I understand. But it's not about the data retention, as far as I'm concerned. It's about disclosure. They are stonewalling my attempts to gain disclosure, and they're using, reconstituting the request on the deceased relative as freedom, as covered. Clearly, they accepted. I explained to them that it's not under the Data Protection Act. So they have then chosen to reclassify it as freedom of information and then used exemptions and then asked me to evidence what my eligibility criteria is. But this is all outside of any legislation, isn't it? They're not they have classified it as freedom of information. They didn't, and then they've asked me for eligibility criteria. I proceeded to forward them documents, and they've just basically said we don't accept these documents. But then how am I supposed to get my mother's social care records?
Like I've explained, it wouldn't be something that we would be able to assist you with. It will be up to the organisation, but you would need to go back to them and just explain that as it's not covered under the Freedom of Information Act either, they need to obviously provide you with a more better explanation and justification as to why they are unable to provide you with that information.
Okay, and if they just say we just don't want to give you it,
then unfortunately you will need to go through the courts then.
Okay, thank you very much. That is my only option then, because obviously I can't bring, if they choose to act against any principle, I can't bring the matter to yourself because it's not a Data Protection Act and it's not a Freedom of Information Act. My only options are to take the matter to court then.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.